So Nicolette, you've built a passionate, mud-loving, free community spanning the globe. Your family went through a journey of discovery and decided to name and create your own version of homeschooling that nourishes the mind, body and spirit, and that's called Wild Schooling. She has also founded you've also founded the Kids Moon Club and founded a wonderful, positive, embracing and informative community in your Wilder Child page and Facebook group. And you provide valuable information and inspiration on your blog. So yeah, be sure to check out the social medias I've posted as well, to follow some of those. And there is a quote that you've got that I love, and I think it was from your website, which was, "My passion and the heart's mission are to help families step back into the circle of wild things and bond with Mother Nature. When rooted in that relationship and ancient connection, we heal, we flow, we fly." And I just love that. It's just amazing. And for those of you who might be new to Raising Alchemy, we're just all about deepening the connection to the spiritual child. And you know, the relationship with nature and children, with us, but children especially, is so strong. And I'm sure, Nicolette, you'll have lots of testament to that. And I feel like sometimes we're living in an age where you know, the being outside in nature is sometimes the exception rather than the norm. And it would be really great to start seeing that move and flip that back, especially with some of the work that you're doing as well, and really make it normal for us to be outside with our children and for that learning to happen in those spaces. So yeah, I'm just so pleased and so happy to have you on the channel. And Nicolette, let's start. Like, I know you talk about how you created Wild Schooling. Could you talk a little bit about how that started and came about, and maybe a bit of your journey?
Sure. It just feels like a lot of these things kind of started, you know, just kind of outside of me. So it's hard to take credit for these things at all. But my daughter was about 5. My husband and I, we run a permaculture farm in Michigan. And so it was just really hard in the early years because we definitely went too big. But so we were just working all the time outside, and he was working full time, and I'm raising my daughter, and she's about to turn 5 and go into kindergarten here. So we were laying the water lines for our superberry field, and and we had a little baby lamb that failed to latch on to her mother, and so she was with us all the time, and they were just dancing in the sunlight, running over the swales and everything. And I just looked at her, and she would dance, and she still does constantly. She sings constantly, and I just had this thought like coming over me of you know, if she goes into the classroom, she's not going to be able to do those things that are so fundamental to who she is. So it wasn't like in a reaction to anything. It was really in service to who she was. Maybe if I had had my second child first, we might not have even ended up wild schooling, because of just the nature of my first child. She's just so sensory, and it was an expression of who she was. So what started out as something to serve, you know, and it was a privilege for us to be able to do that and for us to do it now. What started out as something for her, I just started writing about it, about my experience. And we are on 60 acres, and I had never been surrounded by nature, not on that level, not where I was. There was more nature than me. And through that experience, that humbling experience, I just wanted to share, and it struck a chord, I think, because of what was in the zeitgeist. And now there's this whole community of people who are parenting and schooling in relationship with nature. So it was the time, and now there's so many voices in this space, and I'm so grateful. I think the more the better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll mention this, so probably jumping a bit, but I've mentioned this to you, the Wilder Child Facebook group is just so incredible. And, you know, just credit to everyone that's a member there as well as the founding of that. I just find it's so positive and so encouraging, and everyone just kind of feels like, I don't know, it's just such a feel good Facebook group, Nicolette, and I just love it, and I highly recommend anyone who's interested in any of this to join that group, because I just, everything, there's so many different posts, and I just love even reading other people's stories, and it's just beautiful.
Nice to see people doing something different, because I think half of it is just seeing things done a different way and knowing that there is a choice and that you can do a permutation. I just was talking with a family today, and they called into the school and they said, well, what's the minimum that we could technically do? And that's a question that we wouldn't have asked, right? Like my parents and most parents would not have asked that question, because you assume there is no wiggle room. You assume there's no permutation. You assume there's no way to change it. So half of the Facebook page and the Facebook group are about just people seeing options, different ways of doing things.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you explain a little bit about what nature bonded parenting is and how we can start embodying that as parents?
Sure. So I guess that term for me kind of emerged one day when I was watching my kids. We put so we maple tap in March, and we put a little metal spile into the tree. And I went inside to get something, and I looked out the window, and my girls were actually like suckling off the tree. It looked like that. I just looking, and I had this, just something came over me, and I'm like, I'm in here, they're out there, they're being cared for by a force that's much bigger than me. And I felt a sense of, I'm almost like getting emotional, like kind of talking about it, because I felt a sense of peace come over me. And it was, I'm not alone. I'm not alone in my parenting. I lament the loss of the village every day. And whether or not we can ever go back to that in any shape or form, there's still this idea that you're not alone. And, nature bonded parenting is about really embodying that truth, that you are not alone. And I think that takes time, because our experience with nature has been so commodified, right? Like we go out and we use it, and you go to a place and you consume it. Like you even a hike can be a consumptive, like, a 14ers, and that's not a judgment. Like, there's lots of ways to interact, but in terms of the parenting piece, in order to really feel like it's a co-parent, there is a sense of a decommodification that needs to occur. And I think that takes a lot of time to get into that state of being, a lot of time outside, and a certain way of looking and feeling that we're just not used to.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I love how you use the term around the co-parenting, as nature as a co-parent. That's beautiful. Yeah.
I see her, like, for me, when I go out now, because I've been, embodying this for quite a few number of years now, I don't see risk. I see someone caring, someone giving like a potential, like a toy or a potential challenge to my children, as with a like a good mentor would provide. And it's like the ultimate mentor, though.
Yeah.
So obviously, and I'm co-parenting. I'm obviously, depending on the risk, either, I'm standing in a certain space energetically also, but I'm not standing there alone.
Yeah.
And I think instead, a lot of parents, they see like a lot of scary risk. They see a lot of unknown, or they see things that they can use and then just go back and then talk about how it was used. Like nature craft is like that a lot. Or actually, nature craft it can be embodied as a cultural practice really beautifully, but a lot of times what we see is, and even if you're doing a small craft, you can still enter into it in a really more of a relational way and ask permission, for example. So if you're using leaves, that's wonderful, but you could ask for permission, and that will frame it. Then there's the relationship again.
Yeah, I've asked my daughter. She just loves flowers. I mean, most children and people do, but she will often pick things, and I say to her every time, she almost rolls her eyes at me now, but I'm like, have you asked, love? Can you ask before you pick? And she's like, I have, Mum, in my mind. Like, she's the way she says it to me. And I'm like, okay, love, as long as you've asked, you know, she kind of, oh, Mum. You know, but it's lovely because, you know, I think she spent, well, I can't remember what I was doing, but we're in the garden and she found this whole line of ants, and I went and got her a magnifying glass, and she just spent so long just observing them and watching them, and you know, and it's just those little things and those little moments of kind of just allowing that I think are so precious, right? Like there's just wonder in everything, and it's harboring that so that we remember that wonder, because that's what children are so amazing at showing us and reteaching us, but just allowing them that space and time to do that, right, is kind of what I've found. Like,
and if you feel they're not alone, you're more likely to do that. Like if you understand that there's some relational exchange going on there, you're less likely to step in. But if you won't know that until you feel that relational connection yourself. So that's why it starts with us.
Yeah.
We tend to think of, you know, our children getting all the benefits, and we talk about our children, but it really, to be a true, you know, to be a nature mentor, it starts with you healing that relational connection that for most of us has been severed. And that's why I truly believe it takes time, like a seasonal year. I have a word for it called realigning. And from winter solstice to winter solstice, just be, just heal, just feel. You don't need to do anything, just follow, and bear witness, be a witness, and you will, that will be enough.
Nicolette, expanding on that, so like for, you know, myself, and I was mentioning to you before, I was, you know, like I live in a city. I'm very lucky that we have a beautiful city, and we're surrounded with the most amazing bush and parks, and most places have, you know, a backyard and things like that, and we're very small in comparison to other cities. And but you know, how does someone start with that? Like it's quite easy to say, you know, we can do these things, and we just need to kind of reset and like, and I'm a strong believer that we're, you know, we need to live and lead by example for our children. Absolutely. Like we can't kind of say do this and not do it ourselves, and they learn by observation from what we do and how we experience and interact with things. So where does someone start who maybe, I know there's people in your group as well, and I'm thinking of some of these people that, you know, they live in apartments, or they may not live in spaces that even have trees because it's sort of desert or dry areas, or they live, you know, they're not in rural. So how, with those that don't have access to, I think what you call like wild spaces, and how does this philosophy serve those people? And where can we start, I guess?
I think it's important to know that, like I think about it a lot, like falling in love. You know, you can fall in love instantly. Like there's not an amount of people fall in love in a really short amount of time and have really intense experiences. I don't think that, and I think it's really important to not have nature connection tied to a certain location, to a certain experience, even to a certain time. It really needs to be about everybody's own unique experience. You can have a very intense moment, something that can sit in your memory for the rest of your life, and it's a moment like that. And I think of things that can so when I think about the city and people who might not have as much access, think about how can you amplify that relational connection, right? So you can do that through community. So if you're going out with somebody who you care about, that can amplify an experience. So you can get a lot of nature immersion and a lot of integration in a really small amount of time. Doing things for others, when you help others, it's really, it amplifies it. So community projects for kids who are in the city, where you're doing like a beekeeping on a roof, or you go and visit somebody who is. So I think I talk about this all the time. It's not about the perfect setting. It's about connecting where you are, but in an emotive way. So, and bodily. So I would recommend for kids in the city a lot more sensory experience and a lot more where they lead it. Anything that a child is going to lead is going to be way more impactful. So you can have a framework like you take, and if you hold in rhythm. So again, rhythm's going to amplify. So for us, someone in the city, go out at the same time every day, do the same route. And this is probably seems like, how would you do this, or why isn't this boring? Do it for a seasonal cycle. If you can't do that and you don't have enough, you cannot have the warm clothes, because I know a lot, that's a thing for somebody. Do it however much you can, or do it on every full moon. Some kind of rhythmic connection to Mother Nature, and then let them lead. You know, you can frame it as a nature walk, but you don't need to have a scavenger hunt. You don't need to do any of that. And then you're letting them lead and see what they're drawn to. Because I think what happens a lot with parents, what they'll try to do is broker a relationship with the wild. And you can't do that. You have to let the child cast out the thread. And I mean, have you ever looked out at a nature scene and been drawn to one thing? Kids are too, they're drawn to that specific thing for a reason. So I definitely would say in community, go on a rhythm, go on a route, and let them lead. And if you do that consistently over the course of even a season, you will see profound shifts. It's not about more, it's about your nearby nature. Nearby nature is everything, because if you're going out to try to find this perfect setting, I mean, I kind of think about it like the people who are in your life every single day, how close you are to them. Yes, it's wonderful to see that person who is far away, and it's very special. But it's really the relationships that are with you every day. That tree that you pass every day, and you name it, or you always have your little snack under that one oak. That's going to become a friend. And you can do that in the city. You can do that anywhere. Even if you have a bird, like you go and look for the birds, and you just have a little bird feeder on your, in your apartment window. For that child, they're looking for that rhythm so they can sync up to it. They're not looking for that high. They want to feel safe, just like we all do. So you're safe in a relational circle. Looking at it from an Indigenous village perspective, there was a rhythm, and that rhythm was held with, a religious, it was an experience that just, it spiraled in. And it deepened the more that you did it, and you did it in community. So even if you have a neighbor next to you where they're like, hey, we're going to check the birds even that little bit of added community is going to amplify. So I think less about big epic experiences and more about your trusted friendships that you're forming, and how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, that was amazing. Yeah. There's lots of things in there that I hadn't thought of. I love the rhythm and the cycles of that. And it's actually not something I thought about as the same kind of that cycle of going through, full moon to full moon, or even through the seasons, rather than just going outside and doing whatever. And I love that. And the community, I think that's really, really important, because it's important for us to start living within that community again,
however small.
especially now, right, with everything
Yes.
that's been happening and stuff. And I guess part of that is part of this is how we parent with the nature. And you've mentioned this before through, I guess times of change and things like that as well. How have you, do you have any kind of more to kind of add around that, around sort of the how we can embrace this with those times of change, and maybe something that your family has done?
Yeah, I think for us, it's so, you know, historically, we as humans are wired to change. But the problem is, like, we're wired to changes in the weather, and we're wired we're wired to changes in like food security, but also food that we would have known that was missing or abundant or not abundant, and we might have actually, done some regenerative forestry around that. So, but we could have sensed that was coming. So we're okay with change, but of a certain natural sort. What we struggle with is this new modern change. So if you can anchor to the natural changes, you'll actually feel more secure. An example would be the moon. They're consistent in their changeability. So already, like, that's going to awaken those latent biological, connections, when the birds leave, like the migrations, the changes in patterns. If you are observing those, there's a sense of safety there. So we anchor to these changes within nature to say, like, okay, and then you just feel your nervous system really being regulated within that, and it helps you be able to handle these more modern changes. Because who knows, in like hundreds of years we may be able to regulate with that too, because we're just not there yet. So I think for me it's really those little change, like the fall, like the leaves here. I know that's not every biome, but every biome carries its changes. So noticing together, making those changes real, and then drawing that metaphor back in, like what's changed with you, so there you're getting that information and you're encoding that, and they're strengthening that thread that goes out, and there's more safety there. You can find, it's really, nature is truly a mirror. I like to actually think about it as an extension of our nervous systems. Which is why when you go out, you're like, oh, it feels so good. It's like, yeah, because that's like an extension of you, who you are. You're really extending farther out. And there's a lot of science to this now. You're extending far outside your physical boundary. So there's so much communication that's going on once you get out there. And a lot of it is around the nervous system. So there's not a single thing that I can think that is better in these times than just going out there. And even if you're stepping on your porch and breathing together, making that connection, and then even going back in, even that little bit is going to make all the difference. But living seasonally, living in rhythm, it will make all the difference in terms of your anxiety level.
Yeah, I love that. This is awesome. Nicolette, let's talk about the Moon Club, because I think that flows really well into that. I've just recently joined, as I mentioned to you. I haven't done it before. I'm so excited to be doing it for myself. Like, I'm really excited, as well as with my daughter. Could you explain a little bit about what it is and what people can experience, and we can put some links to that as well?
Sure. So one thing that I just kept like getting hung up on is I'm living in season, right? And but yet I'm tied to the clock, and I'm tied to the calendar. I'm tied to the square. So the first 2 years, I really felt that dissonance. And then the more we got into the lunar cycles and following the cycles and learning about how in a lot of different cultures, the entire lunar month would be named after the phenology, which is the nature that was emerging and changing all around you, that was going on in that one cycle. And so then they named the full moon after it. So for example, in February here, like the ground starts to, well, actually March, let's be honest. The ground starts to break open and things are starting to move and grow. And so that full moon and that entire lunar cycle, that 28-day cycle would be called the full worm moon in some cultures. And it changes depending on biome. That blew my mind. I'm like, wait, there's an entirely different way that they anchored and oriented and named like the months, the amounts of time within their year. And so as we started to walk with that alignment, oh my gosh, I mean, it woke up so much within us. And in terms of like also me and my husband's deep, like a healing, there was a deep healing that had awakened in us.
Wow.
It is, I personally feel like you have to walk in this way in order to fully enter in. You don't have to, but you're leaving. I felt like I'll speak to my own experience. I felt like I was really bonded with nature, but not in alignment from a time perspective. Like I was just being pulled constantly forward by our way of orienting in a modern way. And of course, my kids still like have a traditional calendar, but they can tell you the lunar cycle that they're in. They can tell if they're waxing or waning, like without looking at the moon. They know where they are in the cycle, and they know where they are in the larger solar cycle. So our homeschooling year starts on the winter solstice and it ends on the winter solstice, because we, as the light, like on the winter solstice, then the light will slowly start to be coming back. And so our emergence of our knowledge, like in what we're growing with and learning, that leg of our journey, which that leg is like solstice to solstice, it grows with the light. So then as it gets dark and we hit that summer solstice and it starts to go into the darker part of the year, we start to integrate those lessons. Just like the soil here is integrating, it's integrating by the leaves, it's a composting in. So we start to compost our knowledge, and we have a lot of conversations. We start the fire, we tell our stories, we start to share in community. And so we're really walking but our academic years aren't tuned to a seasonal cycle. So when you're supposed to be slowing down, that's when you start school in the fall. So you can see all the misalignments. And the Kids Moon Club I formed to try to help parents realign, to sync up and to reorient to this ancient framework and way of being. And who knows what more. This is our 4th year walking. And every year it just deepens. I'm excited to keep going.
Yeah, sounds amazing. I got through half of the workbook and my printer failed to continue to go, so it's in the shop. I'll have to go back, and I've got 11 pages, so I can definitely start with that. But yeah, I'll go to the shop and get it printed. But I'm really excited to start reading through all of that and just immerse in that as well. I think it's such an amazing.
I'm excited to have you along. Your perspective is going to be invaluable. I'm really grateful to you for coming. I'm excited.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. Can you speak a little bit around, so the wild schooling, so you have a separate Facebook group, which is just for those people that are engaging in the wild schooling. What's the right term for that? A framework that you have created, is that right? Could you explain a little bit around that for people that might be interested? Is it like supporting the homeschooling using a framework, is that right?
It is, and that's a lot, like a lot of people are in hybrid situations now. So it's supporting that too. And now a lot of people that are in those hybrid situations they're thinking about, oh, I never thought about this before. So it's really, again, like, you don't have to do everything perfectly. You don't have to be in the woods every day. There's no set of criteria for wild schooling. It's a way of being. And I just talk about that over and over again. It's a relational way of being. And it is tuned to a natural cycle. So a lot of people will probably be familiar with unschooling. And there are a lot of characteristics in wild schooling that carry, you know, they have a lot in common. The difference is that it's really tuned to nature. So you would consider, again, no rules, but you would consider tuning to a natural calendar. So you might start, or some people, like our new year for a lot of cultures used to start in the spring, which makes sense. Like when things are starting, we're going to start. Some families start then. Some families start, because I know you in the southern hemisphere, you know, your winter solstice is like is totally different than ours. It would be in July, our so that would be at the heat of our summer. So that might not be the perfect time to start, but so that's something. And then it's also about really spending time in nature. You don't have to spend a ton of time in it, but really getting some of your inspiration from there, and realizing that it's not about pond study. So we get that a lot in nature-based homeschooling and nature and environmental ed, right? It's all about the pond study. So wild schooling really invites you again to say, you know, to get to know the pond and be with the pond and make friends with the pond and see it as a holistic, just a holistic space that's holding complicated relationships. And then the important thing is to then bring that back to yourself and say, you know, I am whole as I am. I am complicated. I am my own biome. And I am in relationship with this larger biome. And then what are the lessons that emerge from there? I encourage parents to find narrative and story on the landscape and to really try to co-parent so much, because I cannot believe people homeschool without Mother Nature. Like, but it's your best resource. I mean, it's so sensory, and you can extend the lessons, and it's ever changing. And I cannot imagine teaching my children without Mother Nature. It just wouldn't. You would never leave out the best. Imagine you found the most amazing book, you know, that you could ever on the subject of homeschooling, and you chose not to use it. We have been trained to not, you know, to not include her in what we're doing. And wild schooling is simply just inviting that back in, but from a homeschooling perspective. Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. Oh,
I learn something new every day about her, like the emotive potential in terms of emotional intelligence and regulation is where I see it being unparalleled. We have these flowers that come up in the same spot every time. It's these white, we call them the fairy flowers. And we'll sit out in them. And that's when I'll really talk about, you know, what's coming out in you that hasn't been out in a long time. What's coming up? That emotive connection. We tend to think about, we're going to study this now. And we're gonna pull it, we're gonna take it, we're gonna put it under the microscope, and we're gonna get the anatomy. We're gonna break it down into its parts, because that's really the mechanistic view of academics. Instead, leave it where it is and spend time and just be, and how is it echoing that emotive lesson back in. You don't have to take everything apart and break it into its little pieces. You can accept it as its whole for what it is.
I love that. And we could apply that philosophy to so many things. Nicolette, I just love this. Is amazing. And hi to those who are on the live stream. Feel free to say hello. And if you do have any questions, I'll check again in a minute. Please pop them in. Awesome. So, how long have you been doing the wild schooling? How long has that been going for?
Well, let's see. My daughter is 8, so it's been 3 years. of being actively, like we're homeschooling. And really it's just, we're living, you know, it's really how we see it. We're just, everything is school, everything is learning. Yeah, it's just, it feels a lot longer, but I guess it hasn't been that long. Time has felt really slow since starting. So that's been a privilege.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. So is there anything else you'd like to speak about before we start winding down?
I just want to encourage everyone to that this is not something that you have to go out and get. It is something that is already within, and it's something like you're just dusting it off. It's everything out there is wired in here. Like, you know, John Young, oh my gosh, he's one of my great mentors. If you haven't heard of him, I encourage you to research him. But birdsong, when you hear birdsong, we're already wired for it. So it doesn't take that much to awaken that within us. And everything is like that. Play with children. Children are wired to play. If you just step back and you focus on your own relational stance, they're going to bloom and blossom because they're already aligned. That's how they're learning, is through play. So, and to play in nature, you've got everything behind you. I guess that's what I just want to make sure everybody out there knows is you have all the support in the world. It's just your own opening up and you're turning towards. You already have everything within you. Your family does. There is everybody. It is an inheritance that you have and you own, and nobody can ever take that away from you. So I am here to support any family. If you're at all scared or don't know how to start, I am here to support you. That is my hope, is that just little steps forward. Every little step, every little connection matters. None are more important than the other. I don't care about scaling a mountain or looking at one tree, touching the bark on one tree. Not one experience is better than the other. So yeah, I'm just excited to have, I think people are waking up to it more than ever before.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't feel as common over here in New Zealand, and I'm sure there's probably a lot more. I've been to a couple in Wellington of people that have just been doing this kind of thing, and I just wanted to see what they were doing, and I've taken my daughter for a day, and she's not at school. She's not at school age or whatever, but it's interesting. I think it's really important for people to know that there is no perfection in this, and that they do what they can. And, I've spoken before on the channel a little bit, like my situation is, I would love to go 100%, but I co-parent with someone who is a lot more traditional. And so it's finding that balance, and you just do what you need to do to be able to do that co-parenting with another person as well as in nature. And it's, I truly strongly, believe in my faith as well, that is what my daughter has chosen for being here at this time. And so it's coming to accept that as well, which is a journey in its own. Yeah,
it's a temporal journey.
Yeah, exactly.
And just knowing that a little bit of immersion and relational connection goes a really long way, because nature is so powerful. A little dose will do you. They say, 50. I mean, it's we're thinking about it in a relationship to our way of looking at time, right?
Exactly.
But that experience, people have had near-death experiences where they say it felt like hours, but they were gone moments. And when kids are in deep, once they click in to play, we don't know how they're experiencing that. I've heard people talk about memory is a strange thing. You know, they could have one moment where they were fishing with their grandfather and maybe it wasn't that long. I know my dad, like growing up, my dad wasn't there that much because he worked like all the time. But when he was there, his presence was so powerful and so strong. I didn't even know I know this sounds like I didn't even really get how much he was gone till my mom like talked about it later. So I just want people to understand that the way kids are experiencing out there, yes, obviously get out as much as you can. I am a proponent of that, but also understand that that is some powerful force, and it's getting in. It's getting in. It's really the rhythm. Just remembering that the rhythm is critical. So if you're checking the birds, even if you're stepping out for that time at the same time, and you're keying in, you're anchoring, because that's biological. It'll amplify it. Looking for those opportunities for amplification and being friends. Children, when they feel safe, you remember that, right? You'll remember feelings of safety. So you have that special tree that you visited every, you know, Tuesday or every new moon, and they'll remember that. But maybe they weren't out there that long. So there's some, I don't want to call them hacks. It pays to look at how we used to align and how we used to be. And those indigenous peoples who are still living in that way, and those forest school leaders and forest school teachers, and Native people who are in your community who are still upholding those traditions and that way of being, those people are gold. If you're lost, go to the people who are already really good friends with nature. and they will be so excited to help you. They will be so excited. So there's people, it's just knowing knowing how to look for them. But yeah, I can help with that too. If you just want me to help, you know, if you need to find someone in your local community, you can message me and I will, or you can email me at info@wilderchild.com and I will help you find a pathway back in. So yeah, I'm definitely here for that. That's
lovely. Thank you. That'd be very helpful for people. I really, yeah, this is amazing. So amazing. Yeah, I think it's right. I think, you know, I'm so fortunate that we're both, you know, both of us are just such, myself and my daughter's father just love the outdoors and being outdoors. And I think part of that as well is realizing that it's all about choice and options as well. And just doing what you can when you can, I think is really important as well, without the force. Like, it's not this like, right, you know, I've got this hour, you know, or a weekend and we have to jam pack everything in that we don't get to do during the week because of other reasons. And just, yeah, allowing it, I think has been key for us anyway. And it's just incorporating, you know, almost every week it's just a little bit more, and I find I myself doing, or I'm expanding a little bit more with it, and I'm going on the journey myself, and it just makes a big difference. I think it's
yeah, you're doing amazing. And that, you know, another thing is like the story of your life together, that it's about the story of your life together, and the more you share those stories, the more integrated that gets in. And when Mother Nature is a part of that story that you're sharing together, it is, again, that amplification, that wave goes through. That's why oral tradition was so important, because it carried memory. And that's why people, you know, the kids will remember what you story. And you're really storying, this is kind of a more complicated thing, but you story the landscape. That's what you're doing when you go out there. You're actually overlaying an emotive narrative component onto the landscape. And that's a way that you entwine your nervous system and your cultural memory into your nature experience and your connection. So if you guys are just talking about it and talking about the birds that you held in rhythm, you know, there's lots of ways to bring this home in a way that doesn't involve like amazing nature spaces. That's not how it was. People were where they were. right?
Yeah,
People were all
yeah,
over. They
yeah.
were where they were. They couldn't leave, but they certainly had a lot of memories together, and it certainly had an impact. So you can use a lot of those things that made us human to make yourself feel more human and connected too.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Wow, yeah, I can't wait to rewatch this and just absorb it again. I just think you've done some amazing, or spoken of some amazing insights here. I just love it. Nicolette, so we've spoken about the Wild Schooling and the Moon Club, and the Wilder Child has a Facebook group, so you've got a Wilder Child page, and from that people can join the group that we spoke of. And your website, you've got an amazing blog, and there's just so much information on there. Is there anything else or other ways that people can connect with you just through all of those channels? And
feel free to email me. The Kids Moon Club only opens once a year, and it's open right now. It closes at the end of December, and then it'll be another year. So if that resonates with anyone, please feel free to go. It's on my website, but I'll put up a link to that. But other than that, yeah, Wilder Child, Wild Schooling, and contact me directly if you need to.
awesome. Thank you so much for being on our channel.
Thank you for just holding this space so beautifully. I love what you're doing. It's really unique, and I feel that. So I'm grateful to you for having me on.
Thank you so much. And we'll talk soon.
Everybody for being here and listening.
Thanks. Okay, bye.
Have a great night, a great day. I'll have a great night.
Great day. Okay, bye.
Bye, everyone.
Okay. Cool, so the live stream stopped.